to another episode of the Virtual Reality Reconstructionist, the premier broadcast for exploring cutting-edge technology in forensic investigation and virtual reality. I'm your host, Roger Reinreiter, owner of Triple R Investigations. Today, we're discussing police training in the augmented reality with Alicia Caputo of Avrio Analytics. Alicia is passionate about the harmony of business and the data they collect. Alicia started helping companies make the most of their data, working with Fortune 500 companies in finance and healthcare industries across the U.S. and government agencies. As the CEO of Avrio Analytics, a predictive data and analytics company, Alicia is focused on providing augmented reality training for first responders. Avrio is a SaaS company focused on leveraging AI to provide scalable, hyper-personalized, immersive AR training for high-risk, low-occurrence events faced by fire and law enforcement responders. Let's get into the interview. Alicia, provide us some background for your career and why you joined Avrio Analytics.
Sure. So I'm one of the co-founders. We actually started Avrio Analytics as a consulting company that was focused on data analytics and machine learning. And so we saw in my background and expertise working for Fortune 50 companies that data was really the key. They collected a lot of data, but they really didn't know how to use it or how to get value from it. And so we started working as a consulting group and really expanded our expertise to a lot of different bespoke groups. And that kind of led us to working with first responders. And so because we work quite a bit with the federal groups, federal government, they asked us to do a research on a training application that they wanted to buy something off the shelf. And they had so many different requirements for this, it actually didn't exist. And so they asked us to do research as far as what hardware, what software. And then when we delivered the report, it actually came down to having us build this training application. And so we really focused on how people can train more efficiently, how we can tie data into that training to make it something that's quantifiably better, and then something that's agile so that they can change and adapt as they need to. And so a lot of the training platforms we saw where somebody created some plan and that was it. You just repeated that every time you wanted to train. And that didn't really adapt and grow with how events took place. And so we kind of got started in the consulting space, but very quickly moved into a productized application. When we met with a lot of people in the community that were either reserve or retired from police or fire and said, this kind of training really doesn't exist. We really want to use it for our groups on this side. And so we did a lot of research, of course, being very research-based and sought to say what was existing, how it was good and how it could be improved. And that's really where we got started a couple of years ago, specifically targeting police and fire for the first response in a training application.
An interesting concept on a business model. Doing this for the last couple of years, I find myself doing the same thing. Why are we stuck in VR? So I'm really excited that y'all are looking at augmented reality.
My company has grown to have the core competency level of PhDs in physics. We have quite a few of them on staff and quite a few data analytics professionals that really focus on the data. So even though it is a training application, it's so important to see what that value is. And it really just hasn't been recorded before. So a lot of the traditional training methods are either traditional classroom style or, they're collecting very minimal amounts of data that they then take and say, okay, well, if you redo that training, did you actually learn from it? Was it worse? Was that training actually hurtful to your teaching? Or, how was that training actually being, thought of by that individual user? And the fact that you can learn from it, it provides a tremendous amount of value also for, future groups using it. We also have groups that are using it just to help train more often because it's such a hurdle, a time commitment and personnel. Every company's kind of hurting with not having enough people on staff how can you better use that time to still get that value training that you need?
Awesome. Well, I know we're talking a little bit about augmented reality, and you kind of touched on it, but maybe go into some detail about the events that led Avrio to that augmented portion as opposed to VR, maybe some comparisons and
Sure.
contracts as far as first responders are concerned.
Sure. So we develop software on a number of different headsets, a number of different platforms. So we are hardware agnostic. We found that it enhances quite a bit of situational awareness to see an actual environment, to physically touch something, not just a physical item like a doorknob or a wall, but also an officer in front of you or someone in front of you. To see them, you gain this muscle memory that you don't normally have in either a fully artificial environment like in VR or in a 2D environment like with paper or screens. And so because you can physically walk those steps, you're gaining quite a bit more data behind that type of training by either, the smells of the location or physically seeing the surroundings that resemble your actual school instead of it being a fake or generated building. And so it was something that we really wanted to develop in. It's incredibly hard to develop in augmented reality. It's easy when you can control all the pieces. And so in VR, you make everything. You can control the settings, the environment, the sounds, the light. And so in augmented, it is a tougher problem, but the value that you get from it is just tremendously more impactful. And so it's something that we definitely decided to focus on because a lot of the trainings that we were asked to complete had a user walking or running through a space. And so because of that, we were very limited in what other hardware we could use. Some of the pass-throughs do have a slight delay, but we are always testing on a number of different devices. So right now our Watchword application is on the Magic Leap 2. And it really does provide a great user experience where users that are very hesitant, that say, no, I get nauseous, I can't put VR on. We have them just put on the headset and they do not feel those levels of disorientation. And so we really like using this piece of hardware that we have already available. But I think it definitely has a lot of value that VR doesn't quite have for this specific application.
Yeah, on the augmented platform, we're talking police, but you also have other softwares. Is it StratScape that you're using for?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah, for emergency situations. So touch on that a little bit. And then does that also roll into any kind of future fire safety specifically?
Yeah, so our StratScape application focuses on instant command training. And so it's really what we consider that step one of before you go into a live drill or an actual event. It's that pre-planning and tactics and decision making that is really crucial for repetitive training. And so that application can actually be used in a number of different pieces of hardware because you're not really physically walking around a large space. You're usually in a room or you're in an area or you're remote. So you're in an office, everybody's remote. And so because you're able to all coordinate and discuss together at any time, it really provides a much better understanding of the environment. And you can see all of these locations in 3D. So now instead of pulling out a flat 2D map, putting out, cameras to look down on it, you can now log in, you can see the 3 dimension of the location, you can place all these items on the board and they're all interactive. And so also kind of, harnessing on that point of muscle memory and training more effectively, you see physical pieces move or you see the symbols that you're used to using and you see it on a real map. You can see the topography of the area. If it's very mountainous or it's no longer this 2 dimensional black and white rollout map that everybody has to be in one room for. It's now a very agile system that a lot of our clients are using to help train whenever they need to.
Yeah, that's a great point because I think we're getting better as first responders and law enforcement and fire safety working together and splitting those responsibilities and being on the same page. I think fire response was at a higher level just because of their business. And I saw in my career that law enforcement coming up to that level to help understand that process and be prepared for the big event in case it does happen. So, yeah, it's great that y'all are addressing that in the same kind of arena. I think not just augmented reality, but for Avrio, having a system that would expand like we're talking law enforcement and fire safety and even maybe crime scene and other areas of the business in the future, right? As far as training and what have you. And we may touch on some of that here in a little bit. But next, I want to move into a Watchword program. So give us an idea on, without any visuals, what that is and how the audience could understand that Watchword program and how it's helping public safety.
So our Watchword application focuses on any sort of force-on-force de-escalation training that you have in an actual environment. And so we work a lot with trainers. And so this system is really for the trainers at the local department to create as many scenes as they want. They can make it for searches, they can make it for de-escalation, or like I said, they can make it just a force-on-force training that they can work on and change in real time while officers are going through. So multiple different officers at a time. They can watch them go through the training and then either adjust it, or they can see an after action report and talk about it after the fact. But it's meant so that they can have full control if the officer is either struggling or they're going through it too quickly, and really work with them on the specific training piece that they want to focus on for that day. And so what's nice about it is that we don't limit the number of training scenarios that they want to create or focus on. Once they have that digital twin of the space, they're able to make as many different applications as they need to.
Okay. So in the system itself, does it have different options to place people and items in there to help for the training environment?
Yes, that's correct. So you can place a number of different characters. And what's nice is that you can switch them up. So they can be a bystander, they can be an adversary. And so you're not really making it so that the officers go in and have that preconceived notion of, white male in red shirt is always going to have a knife, right? It's always changing and adapting. And it's making it so that you go in there and train the officers to go back to their basic training that they were already taught. Are they looking at the hands? Are they looking at the feet? How is that situation playing out? Instead of them saying, okay, I've seen this exercise before, I know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think, and as we deal with most of this in augmented reality and advanced training, I know there's a lot going on in public safety, and while they're addressing this of how do we get better at these different de-escalation. I know Watchword can be looked at as far as active shooter as well. So, and you touched on that earlier as far as this diversity is scanning that twin and having that available. And then the trainer can make their scenario associated with what they're focused on that day. So we can go from the basic, just a building search for new officers, to domestic violence, to de-escalation, and even active shooter, like you're saying. So while you've been, I know y'all did in Colorado some testing on the system with a school, and part of that was using that augmented reality system. So what did you learn specifically about the system and through that process that would be to value today that is moving us forward in this type of environment?
So we have quite a few schools on our platform, and I believe it's because so many different departments can train on the application. And so it's no longer just if there's an incident, the police are going to go and take control of the situation. I think there's so many different groups involved now, where you have administration, you have teachers, you have students, and they all need that communication piece to really fully understand and better control the situation. I think that there's such a good advantage for using technology to train people to have a better way to communicate, to be the eyes and ears, and to relay that information either to police or to different groups, different first responders that are addressing the scene and helping to control that situation. But I think training everybody now is more important. 20 years ago, there was not teacher active shooter training. It didn't take place. And so I think now we get to the point where people want to know what to do and they want to know how they can best help. And I think that comes from a community of saying, here's what's going to happen, and here, let's all train together. And so because our system allows for so many different roles to take place, we can now have, like I said, a university system on the platform where administration is using it, teachers are using it, RAs are using it. And the security resource officers that are at the different locations can all say, okay, here's what's going to happen. Here's who's going to be in control. And that person is going to step up and take control because they've had the training to feel comfortable enough to say, "Yeah, this is my role in this situation." So instead of them being in a bubble saying, okay, you train on your own, everybody train on their own, we're now a community. And so I think that really helps with an agile platform that teaches people what to do.
So I think that's the big player. That's probably part of y'all's business format as far as using the data to lead us down the road, right? Is how y'all are coming up with those. So speaking of that, on the data analysis with your organization, so tell the audience why data is really essential for solving problems like you're doing here with Watchword as far as first responders and active shooters in these volatile scenarios.
I think data plays a huge role in not just seeing the value of training, but also, to make sure that this isn't something that is destructive. And so it's, is that officer being stressed out? Is their brain shutting down, or are they learning more things? I think having those external features into it really help the trainer to say, okay, we need to either make it a different training environment or, change the system up so that that user's getting the most out of that data. And so I think we really send that data back to the instructor to say, okay, how well are these people, how well are your officers going through the training? And how often are they able to train in this type of environment, in this type of set? I think it's important to go through and even add a lot of other data sets to the training. And so we work with a lot of either historical data or real-time data that overlay on these maps to make it so much more valuable, so that you can say, okay, historically, here's what happened, here's what we did, how can we learn from it? And seeing that actually take place is helpful, that instead of just talking about it or having it on something that's a presentation, but actually seeing it occur and take place can really help the experience of the officers to feel more comfortable in case something like that happens again.
With that in mind, on these headsets, and I know we talked about why y'all went into the augmented reality as far as the headset. In that environment, I guess there's less players as far as head manufacturers than there are virtual reality. So where are you seeing that play out in the next, 5 to 10 years on headset application?
We definitely see more headsets being created, especially after the big news of Apple Vision Pro. We are looking for more applications that are more enterprise friendly. And so Apple is very much a single consumer device. And so we are looking to test devices as come on the market. It's an expensive problem, and it's hard to get into hardware. And Magic Leap is one of the best headsets on the market. It provides a lot of benefits, especially from the data collection standpoint that we use. And it's really the only one that is truly augmented reality. And so even with the Apple Vision Pro, it's a pass through. So you're getting a recording of the screen that then reflects back on your eyes. And so it does limit, like I said, the feeling, distorted and not leaning on augmented objects, but it's not as realistic as seeing the actual environment in a real time environment. So not seeing a recording of that screen. And so Magic Leap has spent a tremendous amount of time and money and effort into building this really functional headset. And I think that they are always looking forward to improving that device and making it better. And I think that the early adopters of this technology are going to help craft the headsets that come onto the market, including new versions of that. And so I think it's really important for people to get on the augmented reality bandwagon and start to dictate what they want to see, because it's really going to craft how that manufacturing and how stuff gets designed in the future. And so that's why we really push our clients. Yes, we know it's early technology. It's been out for a few years, but we really want to craft to make this your use case and make it something that is really driving training or real-time experience more beneficial. And so we're doing that by being early adopters of the technology.
Also, are you seeing any industry connections as far as you said manufacturing, and you mentioned another one? Is there any common denominators in those groups as far as augmented reality and how it applies? Or are you finding that doing the application for one industry helps you get into the next one, anything like that?
There are a few really good use cases for why you would want to do augmented reality versus a fully virtual system. And so Magic Leap has been great about introducing all of the developers on their headsets together. And so I know there's quite a few in, manufacturing. There's quite a lot in the medical space where you really can't have a fully augmented system. You want to see your actual building, or you want to see an actual surgical room. And so I think there's a lot of good use cases for augmented reality. We have one, like I said, that it just makes people feel more comfortable and gain a lot more muscle memory by seeing their actual environment. So, like, schools is a great one. And so we train teachers, and them seeing their actual room, being in their room to train, makes sense. Because if there's an event that happens, that's where it's going to happen. They're going to be in that room. They're going to have students having that familiarity of, this is exactly where my door is. This is exactly where I need to walk, is incredibly important. And not having that fake artificial environment to have them walk through it. And so it's been great working with them so far. Like I said, they invite us to a lot of shows, and we have a great connection with them. And so I'm looking forward to seeing, like I said, their Magic Leap 3. I always ask
Uh-oh.
about, what edits they can put on it. And we always have, specific things that we want to see, that our clients really want. But I definitely see more players in the field, especially as Apple picks up traction. More people are going to get comfortable with that pass through of, they want to see their real environment. And we're going to see more developers in this field. So that's the thing as well, is that augmented reality is incredibly difficult to develop in. It's not the same as VR. VR is an easier problem to solve. Like I said, you have full control over the environment. And augmented, you have real things that you have to interact with. And so it is a lot harder to develop in. That being said, it's, once you understand it, it is cheaper to develop an augmented, because I'm not creating the whole world. The desk here is the actual desk. The door is the real door. I don't have to make that, but I have to tell my system how those things interact with my characters.
I know y'all did a white paper working with a school in Colorado. I think part of that was probably a learning experience for y'all, or at least a confirmation of what you were doing worked well, right? So can you kind of go through that process of, first of all, why did y'all do that white paper? And second of all, what kind of things were brought out at that for Avrio to move forward?
Yeah, so that was a couple of years ago in us doing research to see what the value was, if there was any value in having officers specifically train in a school environment. And so what was the benefit behind using augmented compared to what they were already using? And if there was any value behind it. So we were doing it basically to find out if there was any value to go forward and build a system for police officers, if they would use it, if there was a value behind it, and found that there was a tremendous value in that situational awareness, that memory training of officers going through a drill compared to, traditional classroom style training. And also compared to, if there were simulators that were available, what that experience was like. And so really focusing on, is this something that is worth pursuing to really better the field of training for this specific use case? And so I said, what, from our research from it, we did find that there was a tremendous value of memory from the fundamental starting point of, they've already had the classroom training. They knew how to slice the pie. They knew how to clear a space. And so what was the value behind them now doing a live action drill, and how that affected each officer on that campus?
Excellent. So during y'all's development, what caused y'all to transition from just the augmented reality headset and a controller to actual weapons that simulated something realistic? What caused you to make that decision and go to that kind of system?
Having that haptic feedback is very important. Having a real weighted tool that they use, that they would actually grab for in a real, emergency, is very important. The controller kind of still gamifies things. It doesn't have the weight, doesn't have the kickback of an actual weapon. And so having that, and having it at a low cost as well, was very important. A lot of these departments already have simulators or CO2 guns they train with. But having that available for them to use in the simulator, where they grab and reach for something, that they would, it's that muscle memory of, I'm grabbing on this side and I'm getting this weapon. They shouldn't have to look at it. They shouldn't have to pull down, and it should feel the same in their hand. And so it's all those connections of those nerve endings. How does it feel looking down the scope of their actual weapon and not a virtual weapon is important. little things like that, because they're already having to put on a device. And so you are kind of taking them out of their element of, in a real environment, they're not going to put on the device. So how can we make it as similar as possible? And so having a lot of haptic tools is very important for us. Whether it's, pistol, a rifle, CEW, they have to be able, or handcuffs, right? They have to be able to grab those things so that they get the muscle memory of, I'm in this situation, this is the tool I need.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, because I know scenario-based stuff, I've lived through that in my career, and it was a very eye-opening experience, right? When you can actually know that you're searching a building, you get stressed out when you hear a gun go bang and they're shooting at you, and you have to deal with people, right? Put hands on and they're not compliant. So that physical aspect and that stress, bringing that stress level up, is important. So I think y'all bridge that gap by doing that, using those tools of the trade and making them realistic, because we've seen, even in shooting incidents, officers, put their magazine in their pocket in a real shooting action. I mean, they're getting in a situation and you're like, why do you have your magazines in your pocket? Well, that's what they did in their range, right? They were shoot, put your mag up, put a new one in. And that memory and that high stress just resorted back to the training. So what you're seeing there is we have to make it. That's the good thing about this, is we can make it realistic, so they can go through the same process they're being trained on. And when it is real, it's real. And I know for me, that was the only thing about the simunitions or airsoft, is you have to put on this as safety equipment. So you're already prompting the student that we're going to go into this kind of environment. With the augmented reality, it can be very simple conversation. It can be escalated, and it can be bad. They don't really know what they're getting into. So you're not prompting them. You're giving them a headset per se, but you're not prompting them in what level they're fixing to interact with. So I think that's the biggest part of that, is them understanding that and making it as real as possible. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing a lot of that through the years. I think, 15 years, maybe more, maybe 20. And, scenario-based stuff, but that's expensive, right? Yeah, I've probably seen that as getting actors to people to help. And it's very resource intensive and maybe even expensive. I know agencies are even hiring actors to truly make a situation very realistic, as opposed to other officers acting that out. So really interesting.
Yeah, it's expensive and time consuming. And really, I think the goal, not to say that you should never, if you have the opportunity to have live people and have a live drill, but the reality of it is that you really just don't get that often to train. And then when you do, it's expensive and time consuming. And even from the cost of the renting the facility. So I will tell you, all of our clients that are training in schools, they do not have to pay to train in those schools, because they're able to train at 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. and they can go in there and they're not disturbing anything. They're not using paintball. They're using some sort of airsoft gun, and they're actually not interrupting any sort of normal activity that's going on. And so if they have a cleaning crew, they tell them that shots are going to be fired. They're in a training. Those physical people actually don't interrupt the training. And so we had one of our clients that actually trained during a football practice, because they were in the football stadium, and they just put up signs and said, okay, we're training today. So nothing really was wasted as far as scheduling or effort involved. And the fact that they could go in and train in their actual space, made them feel a little bit more confident in protecting and patrolling that area. They knew where the classrooms were. They knew, how to get around and how to clear it and where to take cover. And so that's really important, because training is very crucial. Training for the event is really something that should be done more often. They should be able to train really as often as they can. And it's just a time constraint and a money constraint that really, using augmented reality really provides a tremendous amount of benefit.
Yeah, it's a great point. It does help that you can be really versatile in that aspect. And we got just a short little story about a scenario that I was involved in. So it's involving a train. So the local rail station actually brought a train out there and wanted to be involved in case something happened. They wanted us to be ready, right? So we did that. And it's supposed to be an active shooter event, but the train has to stay on, and these big generators create a lot of noise. So when we get there, the shots being fired initially, you can't hear them. So we had to search the whole train to get to the shooter and finish out the scenario and all that. And they were like, why did you not go to the shooter? And said, we were told there's a shooter, but we didn't have any shots fired. And they said, oh yeah, they were shooting them off. I said, we couldn't hear them, because we got right up next to the train and pretty much audio, everything went away, but it was realistic. It was a learning curve, right? So good things can happen, but I think you're seeing that with your software. Things can happen as well. And sometimes we have to troubleshoot and adapt to see what's happening.
Making it so, I said, we have a lot of haptic sounds in our training. So even putting something off like a fire alarm, how do you react now? I've tripped the fire alarm and I didn't tell you I was going to trip the fire alarm. Now it's super loud and there's, you can simulate lights flashing and the sound. And then I'm still having gunshots go off. So how can I distract you so that it's very likely if there's a shooter, what happens if something else gets tripped, or the event gets changed from what you were planning?
That's a great point. And I think the other thing that I brought to mind was interacting actually live actors in your augmented reality. I think y'all have done that as well, where you have both in the same scenario, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if they want to practice, like I said, with hands-on, you're not going to get that from any simulator, right? You can't touch someone in VR or screens or AR. And so having the combination of the two is really interesting to see. We've done it with sim men, so that the first responders do that with EMS training, where we have augmented characters that are coming up to you and yelling at you and screaming at you. That's a realistic event, dogs barking and distracting you, but you have to stay focused on what you're doing. And so providing that something that you can physically touch really does amplify the training. So we change your environment to make it as realistic as possible, but adding a lot of that feedback so it distracts you. Having somebody come up to you and yelling at you is, from my standpoint, it's very difficult to stay focused on what your job is at hand. But it provides a better use of training than just having, like you said, hiring actors and hiring 5 other people to distract you. Now you really only need one person. You need the instructor there, and then you have physical things you can touch, and then you have a very distracting environment.
Yeah, excellent. Do you remember offhand any of the responses on the Colorado training that officers were giving feedback on the experience itself? What were they saying about that?
Yeah. So, with the schools, actually, we have quite a few schools now in Colorado that we work with. They just really had not been able to train on a lot of other simulators due to costs restrictions, or even have live action drills. And the fact that they can use this system now whenever they want to and not really be limited has just been a tremendous value for them. And so they've been great for us. Like I said, the one school that we have in that provides a lot of marketing content for us is just a very great supporter of what we do. A lot of the other schools in Colorado, like I said, they're so busy, it's hard for them to even get away to do any sort of training. And the fact that they can just say, okay, I'm always on, I'm always, it's 4 a.m., I can run through a drill really quickly. When they have time, it makes it so that they really get the most use out of their job, where they can then feel confident if something were to happen. And so we're very happy with what we have so far, and the groups that we have on the system. The clients we have are great. That's really the majority of our marketing is word of mouth, just because our clients have been so tremendously valuable to us. They've enjoyed the system and they've really learned from it and got a lot of direction on what we build out in the future. So we build stuff based on what our clients are asking for. And we've always had that standpoint of, build for what the client wants. They're the experts in the field, and really focused our core competency to be on things like the software development and the data analytics, machine learning behind it, making these characters interact and move on their own, and really providing that value back to the first responder community.
Excellent. Excellent. I think to close out, Alicia, is there any other thing you wanted to expand on or talk about on the Avrio product line that you want the audience to know about, or reaffirm some of the things we talked about?
Yeah, I think the main thing that we focus on is to always have an ever-growing and developing system. So the days of buying a piece of tech or piece of software and that being it are over. You have to really expect a lot out of that software to keep developing. Technology moves very fast. In a group where, most of our responders are still behind with technology, we really want to give them the most advanced technology that they can use. And so having something that's always growing and adapting is very important. And we're excited to be a part of the community. Like I said, it's kind of self-fulfilling to train people that help us, so I feel very fortunate to be in this
Awesome.
industry.
Well, welcome. You got a good product, and I think it's going to go some places. So yeah, it's good to be involved with you guys early on. So this wraps up another Insight episode of the Virtual Reality Reconstructionist. So we want to thank Alicia Caputo for joining us today and sharing her valuable insights as augmented reality training with public safety. So to our listeners, thanks for tuning in. Remember to follow us on your favorite podcast platform for more episodes exploring the fascinating world of virtual reality and forensic investigation. Until next time, this is Roger Ryan Ryder signing off from Triple R Investigations. Stay safe and stay curious.